Welcome to Day 2 of the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society Virtual Event Series. My name is Steve Barnett. I am President and a past scholar of the Society. Thank you for joining us for our Intern Symposium, where we will hear from our 5 returning 2019 interns. Before we get started, I would like to provide some background about the internship program. Many years ago, Dr. Arthur Bachrock, one of our founding directors, championed the establishment of internships in addition to the Rolex scholarships. He referred to them as mini scholarships, but they soon became known as internships. Our first internships were awarded in 1995, and the program has continued to this day. Currently, the internships are 1 to 3 months in length and typically have a more defined focus into a specific discipline than the broader programming of the Society's scholarships. With the induction of this year's class, the Society has awarded 112 internships. As many of you know, the Scholarship Society is an all-volunteer organization, and the success of the internship program is due to the hard work and dedication of that volunteer network. To those who have supported the internship program over the years, I'm sorry I can't acknowledge each of you individually, but please accept my gratitude. I would like to thank Jenna Close, Vice President of Internships, and Ellie Roberts, Lead Internship Coordinator, along with all the individual internship coordinators. Your hard work has continued to make the internship program excel. Now, let's hear from our returning 2019 interns. Our first presenter today is Liza Hassan, the AAUS Mitchell Scientific Diving Research Intern.
Hi, I'm Liza Hassan, and I was the 2019 Our World Underwater Scholarship Society American Academy of Underwater Sciences Mitchell Scientific Diving Research Intern. So who am I? I'm originally from Chicago. I studied ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of Colorado Boulder. I started diving at the age of 13, and I became an AAUS scientific diver in 2017 at the CIEE Research Station in Bonaire. I'm also the lucky recipient of the opportunity to spend the summer diving and contributing to research in Alaska with Dr. Brenda Konar. So off to Alaska. I left Colorado 2 days after my college graduation for my first time to Alaska. And I joined the Konar Lab from the University of Alaska Fairbanks at the Kizitsna Bay Laboratory in Slodovia, Alaska. So I went from Colorado up to Alaska. So here we have the state of Alaska, where I flew into Anchorage. And then I went down from Anchorage to Homer, which is in our red box, where Kachemak Bay is located. And then I took a water taxi from Homer over to the Kizitsna Bay Lab. And the Kizitsna Bay Lab is only accessible via boat. And then I arrived at the lab tucked into Kizitsna Bay on the south side of Kachemak Bay. And then I started my dive training with Brenda Konar. So I had never dove in a dry suit. I had only done 3mm diving in the Caribbean. So I went from this to this as a dry suit diver. So I started off with dry suit fitting and basic functions. I did my weight and suit check dives, and then started skill dives with the dry suit to make sure I was up to speed. And then my first dive project with Brenda was helping out with the Gulf Watch Alaska program. And so Gulf Watch of Alaska is an annual monitoring program that occurs in Kachemak Bay, where I was, William Sound, Kenai Fjords, and Katmai National Park. It monitors mussel beds, rocky intertidal community, clams, fish, marine birds and mammals, and seagrass, and also kelp forests. So my first scientific diving in Alaska in a dry suit was being engulfed in kelp and doing percent cover surveys. Another big project that I helped out with in 2019 was the Alaska EPSCoR project. And EPSCoR stands for Established Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. and it's an NSF program. In Alaska, the EPSCoR project looks at fire and ice. So that would be boreal forest fires and ocean change. And so I was part of the coastal margins team of Ketchimek Bay. And the CONAR lab specifically studies intertidal community ecology. And so this part of my internship wasn't actually research diving, but I did get to learn a whole variety of new skills, like beach seining and deploying drifters, which you can see over in the right. I also conducted a little study of my own as part of the EPSCoR project. So I studied variation in subtidal community structure along a glacial gradient. And I was wanting to see, does percent of glacial coverage impact subtidal community structure? And so I sampled near subtidal environmental sensors from June through August of 2019. And so we had these sensor arrays outside of the mouth of 5 glaciers. And so our glacier gradient ranged from 6% glacial coverage all the way up to 60% glacial coverage. So I looked at 2 transects per site and 5 quadrats per transect. And so we can see here our sensor array in the middle and our 2 transects going off either side with our 5 quadrats, where I did the percent cover surveys. And I analyzed species composition and biomass. So I would clear samples and take them back to the lab to look at composition and biomass. Sometimes the tide was so low that our sensor array actually stuck out of the water. So typically I would dive on our sensor arrays, but sometimes I ended up in a situation like you see here, where I was walking through the muddy intertidal to collect my samples instead of diving. So I have some results from this study. We saw high within and between site variability. What we're looking at here are 2 NMDS plots. On the left is algal biomass, on the right is invertebrate counts, and our different colors and shapes are indicating our 5 different sites, and the 3 points for each site indicate sampling months. And so what we're seeing here is that there's not really a trend between our sites. And we also determined that our trend doesn't really follow our glacial gradient. So what we're looking at here are 2 bar plots of subtidal algal biomass on the top and subtidal invertebrate counts on the bottom. And what we're seeing are different bars indicating 3 dominant species of either algae or inverts, and then other indicated in blue. And so ranging from left to right are our different sites. And so they're ranging from least glaciated on the left to most glaciated on the right. And so we can see here that there's not really a pattern. It's kind of up and down across our glacial gradient. But we also think that there might be some temporal variation going on due to recruitment in the summer. And there was also variability in total biomass across our sites. So again, on the top, we have algal biomass, and on the bottom, we have invertebrate counts. And so these are the total sums across our 5 sites, again, ranging on the left from least glaciated to the right, indicating most glaciated. And so we see here there's variation across our gradient in total biomass. So what this is telling us is that there's possible impact of other environmental factors besides percent glaciation driving the system here. The next project that I got to help out with was the KEEN project, which stands for the Kelp Ecosystem Ecology Network. And this is led by Dr. Jarrett Burns of University of Massachusetts, Boston. And it's a global kelp forest monitoring project. And so this was actually the first year of Alaska KEEN, which was really exciting because it added a high latitude system to the monitoring network. And so I actually got to develop our species list and field guide for Ketchimek Bay. And the surveys consisted of 4 different runs of transects. So they were fish swath, uniform point count, quadrat composition, and target species swath. I also had the opportunity to help out Dr. Amanda Kelly of UAF with her Ketchikan Bay sensor network. So she has 5 permanently moored CFET sensors around Ketchikan Bay to look at ocean acidification. And so what we would do is dive down on the moorings and collect the CFETs, which you can see here, and we would clean them. So in the middle, you see that there's a lot of growth, and on the right, we are cleaning it off, and then we would download the data and replace the sensor. So some outcomes of my experience as the Mitchell intern. I learned a ton of new skills, all the way from dry suit diving to dissecting invertebrates under a scope. And I also worked with a variety of different groups, universities and government agencies. And I saw a lot of things for the first time. So some of those are sea otters, puffins, kelp, and seals and sea lions. I also had the opportunity to present at the AAUS Diving for Science Symposium. And so that was in October 2019 in Vancouver, British Columbia. I received the Kevin Flanagan Travel Award to help me get to Vancouver for the symposium. And I also received the Best Student Presentation Award. And I saw many OWUSS folks, including our scholars, Kim and Neha. So that was really exciting to get to see people after my experience. So now what? So it's been almost 2 years since I was the Mitchell intern. And I'm now actually the Mitchell intern coordinator. And so that's really exciting. We have an intern this year that you will hear about. I moved to Fairbanks, Alaska. So here I am outside of my cabin in Fairbanks with my 2 dogs that I adopted here. I'm pursuing my master's degree in marine biology at the University of Alaska Fairbanks with none other than Brenda Konar, who is my host for my internship. And I was also the teaching assistant for our AAUS diving course here at UAF. So that was really exciting to get to stay in the AAUS network and help bring more scientific divers on board. So my master's research looks at subtidal habitat mapping in Cook Inlet, Alaska. And so my study aims to understand subtidal habitat associations of sea otters. And so this can actually help us predict sea otter population expansion into areas that were previously unoccupied. And so I do this with remotely operated vehicle surveys. So you can see our ROV on the right, and the middle is actually me on deck of the NOAA Edgecombe operating our ROV. And I conduct research with the National Park Service, the U.S. Geological Survey, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration off of boats around Cook Inlet. So thank you so much to the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society, the AAUS Foundation, Chuck and Kathy Mitchell, George Wozencraft, and Brenda Konar for making this opportunity possible. Another big thank you to the AAUS Foundation and the Kevin Flanagan Student Travel Award for allowing me to attend to present at the 2019 AAUS Diving for Science Symposium. An additional thanks to my many mentors, colleagues, and friends who helped me out along the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liza. It's always rewarding to see the direct impact that the internship can have in a person's career. Our next presenter is Kyra Cipolla, the Dr. Lee H. Summers AAUS Scientific Diving Intern.
Hello, I'm Kyra Cipolla, the 2019 Dr. Lee H. Summers AAUS Scientific Diving Intern. I'm so excited to share my internship details with you all today, and it was jam-packed with research, diving, and a ton of new experiences. This internship was absolutely amazing, and has inspired me to pursue a career in marine science and science communication. To start, my internship host was Dr. Diana Steller, the dive safety officer and a research faculty at Moss Landing Marine Laboratories, which is located north of Monterey, California. It's filled with beautiful skies, water, and as many sea otters as you can count. Before the internship, the 3 goals that we identified and focused on were 1, obtaining OWUSS research diving training and learning about dive safety all at Moss Landing Marine Labs. 2, building research diving techniques, which were developed throughout the summer during 3 marine science related excursions. And 3, conducting independent research which stemmed from one of the excursions. And so I can say with confidence that not only did I complete all 3 goals by the end of the summer under guidance of Dr. Stellar, I also obtained a lifelong friend and mentor. The main research projects took place on 3 different locations for weeks at a time. I was always part of a cohesive but different research team every time and collaborated with diverse groups of people with different backgrounds. So we started with hawksbill turtle foraging ecology, research in Mexico, followed by research focusing on rhodolith beds in Catalina Island, and finally the OWUSS scientific diving course in Big Sur, California. I'll start off with one of the most adventurous excursions of the summer. In June 2019, the research team and I flew to El Perdito, Mexico, which is a small and isolated island surrounded by patch reefs and the nicest people you could meet. We did most of the research in the estuary surrounding San Jose Island with nearby mangrove habitat, which is utilized by hawksbill turtles. With this big project focused, we maintained all these dive sites here with the main project focus on locally managed marine protected areas as a strategy for conservation of hawksbill turtles in the Gulf of California. The project I was most involved with was turtle foraging, and that included collecting sponges, tunicates, and algae within the estuary via snorkel, and prepping those specimens for stable isotope analysis, benthic biomass. And one other thing that I never thought I would do was search for turtle poop. And if anyone could think about what that looks like, here you go. This involved a collaboration of many different people and involved snorkel and scuba fish surveys around the estuary and with the most beautiful sunsets. Santa Stellar is an expert on rhodoliths. That's something that I had not heard of before the internship and I knew nothing about. But from diving in Catalina Island, I'm now almost an expert on rhodoliths. And so rhodoliths are red coral-like algae that form hard spheres as they roll around the ocean floor. The rhodoliths make up beds that are benthic habitats, and they are extremely disturbed. Although they are MPAs, they are not a marine habitat of concern. But from diving along these 3 main sites around Catalina Island, we're able to assess the disturbance of these rhodolith beds. With our central goal of assessing disturbance in rhodolith beds, there were 3 main objectives: evaluate potential vessel mooring systems, identify efficient field metrics to monitor integrity and recovery of the rhodolith habitats, as well as measuring the productivity of the beds. And so this is a very large project with many smaller parts, and my small part, which made a big difference, was helping the researchers assess the damage done to the beds. And so that involved diving and surveying 6 rhodolith beds found in Catalina Island MPAs and quantifying the damage to the rhodoliths from the extensive boat mooring systems. In addition to the rhodolith project, I was able to help on a lobster assessment project, as well as another Moss Landing grad student thesis focused on snail growth and movement. And you can't have a big project without a collaboration of researchers. Everyone in this group was from different areas, including Moss Landing, San Diego State, and California State University, Monterey Bay. And so here you can see all the different parts of the rhodolith project. The top left and middle show what an individual rhodolith looks like up close. They can be round, like in the picture, or they can have branches like you see in the core on the bottom right. And so the bottom left shows the underwater chambers that I assisted with deploying, as well as the core on the right showing the different levels from the rhodolith bed from top to bottom. And I'm very proud of this picture of this core because, as you can see here, it's not as easy as it looks. And so On the left, you can see myself tagging and measuring snails. And on the right, you can see the rotolith live samples that we collected and seeing their size frequency. In addition, as I stated before, I was able to help on a lobster assessment project. Here you could see that this was my first ever night research dive, and I'll never forget how amazing, dark, and also how fast lobsters can swim. And so the final part and most important of the internship was AUS scientific diving course. So during the first week of the course, we had lectures, checkout dives, and practice reef check dives at Moss Landing and the Hopkins Marine Station. And Reef Check is a nonprofit organization that helps ensure the long-term sustainability of health and the rocky reefs and the kelp forest located along the coast of California. And so after expanding our minds in the classroom, we enhance our skills in the water. During the second week of the course, we consisted of camping and going on many dives at Big Creek State Marine Reserve in Big Sur, California. This was my first time diving in dense kelp forests, and the biodiversity was amazing to see. And equally as amazing were the people in this course. And so the course consisted of students of varying levels of diving, from dive instructors, dive masters, to completely new divers. And so we all became very close and we helped build upon one another's skills. So after a long day of diving, we were not done. At Big Sur, we also continued in the classroom. We had lectures on topics from diving physics to dive emergency and rescue to equipment. In the water, we set up the transects, we practiced species identification, and conducted 4 different kinds of reef check surveys: algae, fish, invertebrates, and uniform point contact, which all help characterize the habitat. In between the excursions and back at Moss Landing, when I wasn't living on a sailboat, I was able to learn the ins and outs of dive safety under the guidance of Dr. Steller and Shelby Penn, her assistant dive safety officer. And so I learned a lot about research diving safety and completed my rescue diving certification. Out of the water, I assisted with visual inspection of tanks as well as tumbling tanks. And in order to dive at Big Sur during the AUS course, we brought along the Moss Landing portable compressor, as you can see here. And so I got very comfortable with this very heavy gadget, as well as the Moss Landing compressor. In addition to learning dive safety and equipment, I assisted Moss Landing graduate students on a few different occasions, from helping with an algae project at the Moss Landing aquaculture facility, as you can see on the left, to assisting a kelp growth focused research dive on the right at Granite Canyon, California. And overall, I learned an immense amount of information relating to dive safety and equipment, which will definitely improve my perspective when I dive in the future to keep myself and everyone around me safe. As for independent research and what I've been doing the past 2 years since the internship ended, I have not stopped talking and sharing all the information and stories from that summer. And out of everything that I was lucky enough to research on and get involved with, I've chose to do independent research with Dr. Steller relating to compiled echinoderm specimens associated with rhodolith beds using specimens that Dr. Steller has collected since 1989. Last year, I was the site teaching assistant at a scientific high school north of Milan, Italy, where I got to teach courses from ecology, environmental science, marine science, and a highly requested scuba lesson. Now, as for this year, I will be starting graduate studies at UTMSI, focusing on coral reef ecology. This will involve 3D modeling of coral reef structural complexity, as well as cryptobenthic fish. I'd like to thank everyone who helped me this past summer, especially Dr. Diana Steller, who hosted my internship, as well as everyone at Moss Landing and Reef Check. I'm extremely grateful to the Outward Underwater Scholarship Society family and AUS for the unforgettable and life-changing opportunity. Although this is my final chapter with AUS and Outward Underwater Scholarship Society, I'm looking forward to dive deeper into marine science in the future. And I could talk about this internship experience for hours. And so if anyone would like to hear more information or have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And I'd like to thank you all so much for your interest and attention.
Thank you, Kyra. Congratulations on being accepted to grad school this fall. Next up is Abby Dyas, the Dan Diver Safety Education Intern.
Hi, Our World Underwater Scholarship Society family. It's great to be here with you. My name is Abby Dyas, and I'm excited to share with you my 2019 internship. I was the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society Divers Alert Network Dive Safety Education Intern. I'm going to take us back to 3 years ago at the annual awards ceremony, where I met my cohort of other interns, the incoming scholars, and the outgoing scholars and interns who set the bar very high, some great expectations for what I'm about to present to you today. I also met my internship host, Patty Siri, who I'll get to in just a minute. Before I start, I'll introduce myself to you. I'm from Seattle, Washington, which means I'm a Pacific Northwest cold water diver. If you've ever had the pleasure of diving in Washington, you know how amazing the life can be over here. So I took a cross-country trip over to Durham, North Carolina, where I worked at the Dan headquarters with Patty Siri, who is part of the Women's Divers Hall of Fame. She has years of experience with education, teaching first aid, and instructing scuba. And she is the architect behind the Dan First Aid Training Resources. And I also worked with the amazing Jim Gunderson. Now that's me over there on the right, wrapped up in a blanket because, well, no one told me when I was going to North Carolina that aside from the 100-degree plus weather, they really like to crank up the AC in the buildings there. So you could always find me wrapped up in a blanket or in a snow jacket at my desk in Dan. To kick off my internship, I outlined some goals with Patty and Jim. My first one was to expand my diving knowledge, everything from diving medicine to physiology to standard safety practices and safety training. My next goal was to learn effective education strategies. Working in the training department, it was my job to educate the community on diving safety. My third goal was to understand different global standards for healthcare. Dan not only serves us here in the United States, but it's a global organization helping divers everywhere. And my fourth goal was to contribute to the diving community by making Dan resources understandable, accessible, and inclusive of a diverse audience. I was able to achieve all four of these goals through my main project at Dan, which was revising the Diving First Aid for Professional Divers comprehensive course on first aid for both diving and non-diving related injuries. We were creating version 3.0. This course is great for professional and volunteer divers. It was created in 2006 at the request of aquariums to have staff and volunteer divers train in a way that they could maintain their accreditation. The course complies with OSHA regulations and the International Liaison Committee on Resuscitation guidelines. A trip to the field. This is Patty, Jim, and I in the conference room going through the DFA Pro course materials. We were going through all of the photos, videos, and the text word for word, as well as the assessments that go along after each chapter and the final assessment at the end of the course. And we were revising the course so that it was appropriate for a global audience. So the goal of 3.0 was to expand the global application. Everything from using more inclusive language to representing diversity in our photos and videos. And we were also revising the course to include synthesized global guidelines for healthcare. Now at Dan, we take diving safety very seriously, but we also like to have a little bit of fun. So here's a picture of us after we reach chapter 26 in the 32 chapter long course. It's quite long if you've ever taken it before. We probably went through the course about 10 times over the summer. So ILCOR, the International Liaison Committee on Resuscitation, is the parent organization for national organizations such as the American Heart Association, ANSCOR, which is for Australia and New Zealand, and the European Resuscitation Council. They create guidelines for first aid procedures in their region. And these are the three main organizations that the rest of the world follows. We wanted to make sure that DFA Pro 3.0 incorporated all of these guidelines, not just the American Heart Association. We did this through synthesizing all the guidelines. For example, we can take a look at foreign body airway obstruction and the guidelines for that. The American Heart Association recommends treating this with abdominal thrusts. ANSCOR recommends chest thrusts, which are higher up, and back blows. And the ERC recommends a combination of all three of these techniques. In version 2.0 of DFA Pro, we recommend abdominal thrusts. But now in 3.0, we're going to recommend ways to use all three of these treatments. We wanted to reflect these changes not only in the text, but in the supplementary materials as well. So one of my jobs in revising the course was to plan out the new videos that are going to go along with 3.0. So you can laugh along with me and my artistic skills here, drawing a storyboard for the videos that we are going to film later on. I'll show you what 2.0 looks like for foreign body airway obstruction.
You encounter a patient or other person who is displaying the classic signs of choking, such as hands held to the throat, struggling to breathe, but without air movement, or if they are making high-pitched wheezing or whistling sounds, you should be prepared to help the patient clear his airway.
You breathe, sit down. Can we get some help over here, please?
So you can see there, the rescuer was demonstrating abdominal thrusts. Now back to my storyboard. At the bottom, you can see my drawings of abdominal thrusts, but also back blows and chest thrusts that will be incorporated in the new videos. DFA Pro 3.0 is also going to incorporate some additional resources, such as this new slate that shows oxygen kit assembly and the components of the oxygen kit. We know that when we're under stressful situations, sometimes it's hard to remember all the details. So having these little cheat sheets is going to make it easier to give people the appropriate care they need. And once again, going back to the drawing board, one of my goals at Dan was to better understand diving physiology. I really wanted to wrap my head around how breathing 100% oxygen helps with diving injuries. So I'm a visual learner, and I drew out this diagram of what the alveoli in the blood looks like under different partial pressures of air in breathing conditions. So we have normal air and 100% oxygen. Patty and Jim really liked this figure, so I'm proud to say that it's going to be in DFA Pro 3.0. You can see on the right is the polished version. 3.0 is coming soon. It's in the process of final edits right now. Jim is working on the instructor guides and incorporating the new changes into the teaching and the e-learning platform where students learn DFA Pro. So while DFA Pro was my main project at Dan, I also was fortunate to participate in so many other projects and activities. One of them was having a tour of the Duke Hyperbaric Medical Facility, where I got to talk to the hyperbaric chamber technicians and even walk through one myself. I earned my valve repair technician certification along with visual inspection and oxygen cleaning for cylinders. And one of my favorite memories of my internship with Dan was attending the World Scout Jamboree in Beckley, West Virginia. Now, if you can imagine this right now, 2 years ago, 44,000 scouts were gathered all together in tiny Beckley, West Virginia for this event. They were able to participate in lots of different activities, including scuba diving put on by Patty. Dan was there right after the scuba diving activity to introduce scouts to diving first aid and CPR. So I served as a CPR coach, not offering full certifications, but demonstrating the 30 and 2 technique. So we would have a group come in, I would demonstrate 30 chest compressions and 2 rescue breaths. And then they were able to use our dummies, and I could use the iPad to measure their compression rate, compression depth, and the effectiveness of their rescue breaths to give them training. Now we had friends there from Taiwan, Chile, Peru, so you can imagine lots of languages were represented here. I actually ended up teaching more CPR in Spanish than I did English, which was a great test of my high school Spanish skills. And you can see down at the bottom, my stat of 600 plus scouts in our tent in just one day. So you can imagine how many people we were able to introduce CPR to in a matter of 2 weeks. At the end of my Dan internship, I was able to present my work to the Dan community as well as the greater diving community. And one thing I shared at the end of my presentation was my goals for the future. So this is from 2019. Teach people how to safely enjoy the ocean and respect it. And I'm standing here with you today in 2021 to proudly report that that's exactly what I've been doing over the last year. After I graduated from college, I became a dive master and working with Annie Prawley, who many of you may know. She's an underwater photographer, filmmaker, and incredible scuba instructor. I've been working under her guidance to help train kids in open water diving, rescue diving, first aid. We wrote a scientific diving course, and now I'm in the middle of taking my instructor development course. I've also learned a lot about underwater photography and how to communicate the underwater world to people. So to add on to my goals, now someday I hope to have a camera like Annie's so I can continue doing this sort of work and sharing the ocean that we love so much in a safe manner. Looking ahead, I just accepted a position to study kelp forest ecology and restoration as a lab technician and field technician at Sonoma State University, where I will be helping with research and also teaching diving and coming full circle, teaching DFA Pro to my colleagues. With that, I have so many people to thank for all of these opportunities and for helping me get to the place I am today. Everyone from at Dan to the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society and those outside who have supported me in numerous ways. You can see my contact information down at the bottom. Check out my underwater photography and diving adventures on Instagram and send me a message over email. We like to say at Dan, may all your bubbles be silent. Thank you so much. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Abby. I'm confident you'll make a terrific scuba instructor. Our next presenter will be Michael Langhans, who is the National Park Service intern.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Langhans, and I was the 2019 Our World Underwater Scholarship Society National Park Service Research Intern. I was lucky enough to be chosen for this internship, which offers a brief glimpse into the diverse dive operations that happen within the National Park Service. Over the course of almost 5 months, I was able to dive in wild and remote places in collaboration with 8 different national park units. Unfortunately, I don't have time to tell you about everything that I got to do, but I will break my internship down into the 4 main types of diving work that I got to experience: archaeology, biological surveying, cultural resource preservation, and outreach/education. This internship was sponsored and facilitated by the Submerged Resources Center, or SRC, a seasoned team of underwater archaeologists, photographers, and diving experts. This group is involved in almost every dive operation that happens within the National Park Service, so they were the perfect people for me to meet. It was at their landlocked headquarters in Colorado, where I began my internship, got oriented, geared up, and prepared to start my journey. From there, I traveled with the SRC to Isle Royale, a northern island in Lake Superior and home to a number of well-preserved shipwrecks. About 10 major wrecks surround this remote island and draw in wreck diving enthusiasts from all around the world. Here, I would join the SRC in an expedition to monitor and preserve these wrecks through 3D photogrammetry. To do this, we would be using a custom-designed, state-of-the-art photogrammetry machine created in part by the SRC called the Sea-Ray. This newly designed machine, a combination of 3 cameras mounted on a DPV, would be experiencing its first dip in the Great Lakes this summer after its recent inception. While running, the system produces about a terabyte of photographic data in an hour, which is then used to create highly accurate 3D models after hours of complicated computing. These models can serve a multitude of purposes. They can be used by archaeologists to examine the rate of deterioration on these wrecks, can work as a digital preservation of the wrecks, and can be used to show these sunken artifacts to those who may not be able to see them in person, like park visitors or landlocked researchers. Now, of course, long dives in the Great Lakes weren't without difficulty. Near freezing water, a highly isolated location, sometimes unpredictable and fierce weather, as well as limited resources and staff all made for a challenge. Diving here involved lots of careful planning and expert execution, and was a great way for me to experience the expertise of this dive team. It was interesting to start off my internship in the most unforgiving environment of my summer, and was a strong contrast to the next park that I'll talk about, Biscayne National Park. Now, in Biscayne, we did very similar work, creating models of wrecks with the Sea-Ray, but it felt much different. In Isle Royale, we were tucked away in our own little cold corner of the world, but here in Biscayne Bay, just outside of Miami, it was a different story. Biscayne has a large dive program, so support was never too far off, and the water was warm and clear, which made long dives much easier. One of the biggest contrasts of this for me was the project visibility. When doing something like this next to a large population center, lots of people are interested in getting involved. We had a guest or two joining on almost every day that we went out, whether they were a park employee, an archaeologist, or a student. People wanted to be involved, and I appreciated the ability to experience that subtle type of outreach. One of our main goals here was to image the wrecks of the Maritime Heritage Trail, a selection of 6 of the most interesting wrecks within the park. Along with imaging, we also performed small auxiliary measurements like geotagging the wreck location to accurately place the model and measuring key parts of the wreckage to ensure that the models were to a precise size. Alongside imaging, this trip also involved more strictly archaeological work. The SRC has been working in collaboration with a number of different groups in Biscayne National Park, and I was able to assist and or observe in some of their archaeological measurements. These included things like post-hurricane site assessments, to examine how all these historic sites fare after large tropical storms, and taking sediment cores, which can allow archaeologists to study how certain substrates can preserve artifacts. On a lot of these days, I acted primarily as a support diver, just hanging around to assist in whatever task may need me. I also got to spend quite a bit of time taking photos. The SRC wanted some shots documenting the work being done, as well as general site photos of the wrecks for publicity. I was honored and pleased to have been assigned the role of collecting some of these and had a great time working on it. I was lucky to spend quite a while with the SRC, seeing how the Park Service works to preserve and document archaeological resources. But I'm excited to tell you all about the next segment of this presentation, the biological work of the National Park Service. Most of the teams that I joined doing biological research were part of the Inventory and Monitoring Network, which works to gather and analyze information about specific parks' natural resources. I started off this work by joining the South Florida Caribbean Network Inventory and Monitoring Team down in Dry Tortugas National Park. Dry Tortugas, an iconic park centered around a massive island-based fortress, is a special park that is a location for annual monitoring on reef health. Almost 70 miles off the coast of Key West, this remote location is home to some of Florida's healthiest reefs. This team has been returning to specific locations here yearly and has been doing so for decades. Here, I was working with a small crew of experienced survey divers, so during this trip, I played a more supportive and photographic role. In order to aid in the speed of data collection, myself and the other interns helped set up the transects so the rest of the team could speed through them. One of the specific things that this group was looking for was signs of coral disease. Dry Tortugas, home of some of Florida's healthiest and most isolated reefs, has still seen instances of disease-related coral loss, especially in recent years. This, alongside bleaching and other stressors, has been causing coral cover in the area to travel on a steady decline. I should mention that there is still a silver lining. There are many healthy corals, ones that have survived waves of bleaching and disease outbreaks, as well as a bustling fish population. The complex nature of the reefs out here also creates an excellent spawning and nursery environment for many species, and unique oceanographic conditions allow this reef to replenish spawning grounds on heavier fish reefs in the Florida Keys. Another national park that I got to partake in biological monitoring in was Kalaupapa National Historic Park. A remote settlement on the Hawaiian island of Molokai, this park also had yearly reef monitoring by a small team. These reefs are far from any large population center and experience very little fishing pressure, making this data valuable for comparison to similar reefs in more highly impacted areas. While not a large, sprawling reef like in Dry Tortugas, these waters still had relatively healthy coral and fish populations. Despite the warm and clear water, data collection here in Kalaupapa could be challenging. We had a very small window to complete quite a lot of survey and had to work around unpredictable weather. Kalaupapa is on an exposed peninsula where fast and strong winds can quickly create small craft warnings and prevent working, so we had to make every good day matter. Alongside all the dive surveys, I got to experience a bit of the other marine science work being done by the inventory and monitoring team here. These included things like water quality surveys to compare and contrast potential influences on different reefs, and monk seal surveys, checking in on the local population of adorable and endangered pinnipeds. The final tropical surveying location that I visited was in the United States Virgin Islands. Here, I was doing more reef surveys, but with a much larger group. I was to join in on the Virgin Islands leg of the National Coral Reef Monitoring Program, a large-scale collaborative monitoring effort spanning many agencies, including the National Park Service, NOAA, University of Virgin Islands, and the Nature Conservancy. All in all, it was around 30 divers, and everybody was needed too, as we had a lot of work to do. At least 250 sites had to be completed over a 2-week period, so there was no time to waste. 6 different teams went out each day to survey randomly selected sites all around the island, sometimes doing up to 8 dives a day and collecting a variety of coral reef metrics. Here, I was brought on to work and got to collect lots of data. Much like the other reefs I've been on, these are facing a multitude of threats. Bleaching, tropical storm-related damage, and disease were all things we kept an eye out for, taking careful note when any of it was encountered. As in dry tortugas, not all is lost in the Virgin Islands. We still ran into certain reefs that looked much healthier than others, or experienced large and happy-looking corals. A welcome sight after seeing many of the less fortunate ones. I appreciated this opportunity to partake in such a large data collection mission, and can appreciate the value of having such a comprehensive data set. The next group that I join up with manages and maintains one of the most comprehensive monitoring systems in the National Park Service, the Kelp Forest Monitoring Team at Channel Islands National Park in Southern California. Now, this was different from all the other biological surveying that I'd experienced that summer in a couple different ways. Firstly, the environment was much different, being a cold water kelp forest. And secondly, these sites were much more remote than in the others, so all the trips were done off a liveaboard. The kelp forest monitoring team would spend week-long trips out on the water, diving and collecting data all day long. I had done some kelp forest surveying in the past, so I was excited to be able to apply my experience here and help collect data with the team. Running for over 38 years now, this is one of the longest lasting monitoring programs in the Park Service. This huge dataset has informed many management decisions to the state of California, including influential and environmentally beneficial ones. One of the things I found most impressive about Channel Islands National Park is the sheer volume of data that they produce. With 12 different survey types collected, data collection lasted pretty much all day long. Living on the boat removes the need to worry about transit to and from sites and allowed for more time for science. Long days of diving were supplemented with topside work like invertebrate sizing, plankton tows, and hydrophone recordings. To me, the kelp forest monitoring program at Channel Islands National Park seems like the pinnacle of biological surveying within the National Park Service. With such a long-running dataset and such a diverse array of survey types, this program is thorough and committed to the protection of a special and heavily impacted place. And with that, I will move on to the next type of work that I got to experience: cultural resource preservation. The main park that I'll use to exemplify how the Park Service works to preserve cultural resources is Pearl Harbor National Monument. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this location, the Hawaiian harbor where the 1941 attacks brought the United States into World War II. This memorial focuses primarily on the wreckage of the USS Arizona, a sunken battleship that took down more than 1,100 sailors with it. This site, along with the wreckage of the USS Utah, is managed and maintained by the National Park Service. A large number of visitors come to see and pay respects to these sites each day, and the Park Service is careful to make sure that the location and the wreckage are properly cared for. Keeping these culturally important locations safe means things like maintaining buoys to make sure these wrecks are properly marked in a busy harbor, and things like protecting them from disturbance. As they are essentially war memorials, they have barely been touched since sinking and therefore have many artifacts from years ago. On the Arizona, we saw a lot of stuff: old wreckage, cooking supplies from the galley, even remnants of a shoe. These wrecks remain an important location for many visitors, and it is crucial to them and to the Park Service to keep them as intact as possible. Another park that I visited that exemplified cultural resource preservation was Kalaupapa. Decades ago, Kalaupapa was chosen as the location of a colony for patients with Hansen's disease, or leprosy. These unfortunate people were essentially imprisoned indefinitely here, many unable to ever leave. After care for the disease was developed, the quarantine was lifted, but for many patients who had spent most of their lives in the peninsula, chose to stay. Years later, the area was designated a National Historic Park to preserve the story of those who suffered, struggled, and lived there. The peninsula is still home to a few of these patients, who remain there with their family. The land is essentially governed by these last residents, allowed to dictate the rules to their home. Resultingly, tourism is limited in order to maintain the land as a peaceful and unexploited one for those few residents remaining. I felt fortunate to be able to visit such a unique place, and grateful for the opportunity to see how the Park Service works here to preserve a storied history and how they aim to preserve the lands as the residents desired. The final type of work that I'll discuss is outreach. Now, this is typically intertwined into other work in many different ways, and I got to experience a variety of them, be that documenting biological life on the wrecks at Pearl Harbor to help teach visitors about what lives down there, to creating and sharing large models of the wrecks at Isle Royal. All this work helps to increase the visibility of submerged public resources. However, the specific program that I'll be focusing on here took place in Biscayne National Park, Youth Diving with a Purpose. Youth Diving with a Purpose is a nonprofit designed to preserve and protect submerged cultural resources while also providing archaeological education and training to underprivileged youth. These programs have a special focus on shipwrecks of the African slave trade and uncovering more detail about the maritime history and cultures associated with them. They have partnered with Biscayne National Park to provide dive and archaeological support out in the field. Here, I was tasked with the job of documenting this program for an article, so I was lucky enough to spend my time swimming around and photographing this group as they worked to sketch, document, and ultimately map the chosen wreck. It was inspiring to see these driven students put so much effort and hard work into this project, and I appreciated the opportunity to experience how the Park Service strives to provide opportunities for all to appreciate and benefit from our public spaces. Finally, the last stop of my internship was also outreach, but a different kind. I traveled to Washington, D.C. to give some brief presentations on my work to some of the Department of the Interior National Park Service assistant directors to share with them some of the benefits an experience like this can provide. It was nice to end out my internship by seeing where some of the big decisions are made that affect all parts throughout the system. And with that, my wild journey was over. I'm extremely thankful to be able to have gotten this brief glimpse into the different types of work the National Park Service dive teams do, and to experience the underwater environments in all these different parks. Of course, I was helped and guided by countless people along the way, and I owe them all many thanks. Everyone who assisted, gave support, extended their kindness, and allowed me to experience this internship to the fullest. Thank you. None of this would have been possible without you. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Michael. You captured some wonderful images during your internship, and that experience will provide a nice foundation as you pursue a career in underwater media. Our final presenter today is Ben Farmer, who is a Dr. Jamie L. King Reef Marine Conservation Intern.
Hi, my name is Ben Farmer, and I was the 2019 Dr. Jamie L. King Reef Environmental Education Foundation Intern. So it was a little over 2 years ago that I got an email from Stephanie Tate, and it was to tell me that I got this internship. And I just remember at the time, I absolutely could not stop smiling. Probably the best email I've ever gotten. And that was senior year. And for me, it was, of course, a lot more than an email. It, for me, was symbolic of leaving Kentucky for this new stage of my life. And since then, I've gone on to work as a dive master and as an educator during my gap year, and then to begin a PhD studying coral disease, which I'm so excited to share with you all about. But before I get into that, I want to say I never expected to be a marine biologist, really. Teaching kids about NASA groupers like in this photo. I grew up in Kentucky, landlocked, and though I grew up going on vacations to the beaches and whatnot, even just being in water a little bit deeper than I could stand, like I was a decent swimmer for sure, but I would get this anxiety at that point. And to get an internship like this, if I even have like anxiety about swimming, I was like, could I really do this? Is this something I'm cut out for? So I figured it was time to find out. And to give a quick summary of what it's like to be an intern at Reef headquarters or Reef HQ, I think it's important just to show the group I was surrounded with during this summer. So from left to right is Matt, myself, Stacy, and Kate. And something that I think is really special about the Reef internship is you get this close-knit group of interns together. So it's a little different than some of the other Our World Underwater internships because you're with this group throughout the whole summer. And just to give an idea of what the early part of my internship was like, a lot of it is in our headquarters in Key Largo, but some of it was also out on the boat. So this photo is from that first week on the water. And a lot of that time early on was working on Reef's volunteer fish survey project, which is what we were doing on that day. And this is this super valuable project, and being able to kind of come on board with it was a humbling experience. The Volunteer Fish Survey Project, or VFSP, has had 259,000 surveyors in its database at 15,000 sites. So people go out and do a survey of what's out there in terms of the coral reef fish species. And it doesn't just have to be coral reefs. And that's 16,000 volunteers since Reef began in the 1990s. So that's the world's largest database of fish sightings. And something that's really cool about Reef is outside of the day-to-day tasks that you have, that you also can pursue an intern project. So for mine, I chose to create a system of flashcards with help from Jana Nichols and Christy Pattengill-Simmons. So what I wanted to do here is create a better system of learning for Reef volunteers. So the people going out and surveying fish, make this a bit more accessible of a process to be able to identify what you're seeing in the water. So I chose to make flashcards for the tropical Western Atlantic. And since I left, since that summer of 2019, this has become a global project. So interns that have come after me have expanded out of just the tropical Western Atlantic, which I think is just so exciting. And it's contributing to that volunteer fish survey project in a big way. So that's, again, kind of on top of the day-to-day tasks at Reef HQ, which are also so important. So that can be answering phones, being there in person when someone walks through the door, creating social media, event flyers. And these things are really critical to the upkeep of Reef. So it's just one headquarters in Key Largo, but it really is a global effort. And one of the big takeaways of Reef for me was the value of learning just identifying fish. I got to recognize some absolutely wonderful species in the water, like this yellow stingray. So this was taken by my fellow intern, Michael, who you'll see on the next slide. But it's just indicative of these fish that you begin to see in the water that you maybe never would have recognized before if you didn't really put in that work to be able to identify fish via, maybe it's just going through flashcards before you're in the water. So throughout the summer, I got to see just amazing fish like guitar fish, Goliath groupers, stingrays, eagle rays, sharks, you name it, on these dives for the Volunteer Fish Survey Project. So that shot, again, was by Michael, and we were able to continue this time-honored tradition of the Reef and National Parks interns linking up. So over 2 weekends, we got to go to Blue Heron Bridge in West Palm Beach, Florida. And this is this area with just absolutely world-renowned, stunning fish diversity. And being able to go there was just, it's one example of how Reef allows you as an intern to record really important data all over Florida. And additionally, these dives were super shallow, which actually meant that I got to do the longest dives I've ever done at just over 2 hours. And we got to do 2 of these. So it was also a chance to, for me, to witness professional photography up close with Stacy and Michael. They had their full camera setups in the water. And this ended up actually inspiring me to buy my own underwater camera for the first time. And this kind of gives an idea of what Michael was able to shoot underwater. And just the detail here is amazing. It's a shot of a frogfish, this just splendid animal. We probably spent a full half hour just kind of staring at it and seeing what it was doing, which honestly wasn't much, but it was still just that interesting. And these dives helped to show me that fish are intrinsically important and precious outside of just their ecological and economical relevance. There's so much to a dive when you're able to identify and really understand what you're looking at. So another big program of Reefs is the lionfish or invasive species program. So what I was able to contribute as a Reef intern was at the Fort Lauderdale Derby. And there was going to be another one, but there was kind of a big hurricane that blew through. So we did thankfully get to do at least this one. So pictured next to me here is Moose. So she was a lead intern at the time that summer. And it was awesome being able to work alongside someone who was legitimately a lionfish extraordinaire. Like, she knows everything about these fish. So together we were able to log over 400 fish. I was at 417 for this event. And that was just like an eye-opening number of catches. This is just a chance for fishermen to come in from all over, not just Florida, and compete in a way that's really fun and engaging and leading to the depletion of a invasive fish stock that needs to be depleted, and there's really no other way to do it other than people with spears in the water. So in Fort Lauderdale, I also got to do my first drift dives, which was super exciting and a little bit daunting. I'll say I was also a bit scared of the spear. So we were out there doing lionfish spearing, and honestly, I felt a little bit inadequate. This was sort of a humbling experience. As you can see in this photo, the spear is actually not in my hand. I'm just holding on to the little loop at the end. So I didn't realize you've got to hold onto the spear after you release it to shoot the fish. And I caught on to that. I got that afterwards, but with a little gentle encouragement and patience from Tom Spark, who took this photo here, and Dr. Ali Candelmo, the lead of the invasive species program. It kind of pushed me and made me a better diver and more aware of what I'm doing on a dive like this, which really requires a lot of your attention. And now I can say over 2 years later, I'm a seasoned land fisher, and I don't know if I would have been able to kind of get pushed on that path without dives like this. Something else that Reef is great for is it provides these wonderful opportunities for volunteering all over Key Largo. So one place that I got to visit was Marine Lab, and just behind Marine Lab is this marina that houses an undersea hotel, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. But just above this hotel is this kind of murky water where sometimes you get just these beautiful little pods of manatees. And I got super lucky that the one day that we went, they were just right there hanging out. And while you can't approach a manatee, you can be in the water. And if it comes up to you, I mean, that you get shots like this. And for me, this was just this really soulful experience. I've never been up close to a whale and seen its eye and all that, like this, proverbial like eye of the whale moment. But for me, this was about as close as I think I could get, because this was about as far away as it got. It ended up getting a lot closer, and this baby manatee is just looking at you. And for me, this was just so touching. And I did return here for dive master training, so I'll touch on that a little bit later, but this marina was just a really special spot for me. And another place that I got to volunteer was Coral Restoration Foundation. So this is this incredible nonprofit in Key Largo alongside Reef that's more on the coral side of things than the fish side of things. And they're a premier restoration initiative in the United States. So with them, I got to do 4 dives, cleaning the trees where the corals are growing on, and then also being able to take those fragments and put them in bins that other volunteers ended up outplanting on the reef. So this picture just shows some of those fragments in transit. So I got to work with an organization I really highly admire and meet the coral side of marine conservation, and one of my best friends as well, and I'll show a picture of her later. So I think my most treasured part of the Reef experience was the education program. So this for me was really a chance to broaden my perspectives and overcome some mental hurdles, because I came into this internship never really having a leadership role with kids. And coming out, I absolutely did. And this was just one example of where I got to lead a lionfish dissection, and there's the kids all crowding around. They're like, everybody wants to see a fish get dissected, I guess. They were really into it. And it was really fun to be able to know how to do it and take that expertise and actually pass it on to some younger folks. So I really want to acknowledge that Brittany Parker, who was the education and office coordinator at the time, and then lead interns Moose and David, they really pushed me into this education program side of things. Because for me, it was a little easier to jump into the diving and the identifying of fish and that sort of thing. But to lead talks in front of whole groups of middle school kids on fish identification, Florida Keys ecology, that's a little bit different, and that's a little bit more daunting for me. But by the end of it, I'd led 2 lionfish dissections, I'd led 3 talks, and for me, this was just a source of emotional growth and had a lot of impact on me. So some highlights from camp. So this was Ocean Explorers Camp, and I did 2 of these sessions throughout the summer. Probably my favorite part of the internship, which I didn't quite expect, but this was 2 weeks, one in June, one in July, and we got to lead the kids kayaking through mangroves, snorkeling over reefs, and you can see the kayaking shots here. But the kids were just absolutely heartwarming to be around, really formed some close connections in just a week, and it was really pretty sad to see them leave after that time. But on the left here, you can see David is actually towing one of those kids, so it wasn't always fun. Sometimes they were a little unruly, and in this case, one of the kids just refused to paddle, and we did our best, but you know, sometimes you've just got to tow them back to shore. So that's what was going on in that shot. The glass bottom boat was really cool, and I imagine even cooler for the kids who hadn't seen something like this before. So this is a boat that goes out of John Pinnekamp Coral Reef State Park, and what's so cool about it is it's almost different, a different experience than you would ever get snorkeling or diving. And I know with diving, like everybody talks about how you're right there next to these fish, these coral, in a way you can't be on the surface. But this is even a little bit different than that, because it's like this moving underwater aquarium. The fish almost don't even pay attention at all to the boat above them. Whereas if you're a diver, unless you're on a rebreather, you've got these bubbles making sounds and whatnot. So the turtles and the sharks they got to see, I mean, the kids just loved it. And I think every kid should get an opportunity to do something like this. So this was near the end of our time with the Ocean Explorers, and this was coming back from a snorkeling trip over the reef. And for me, this was kind of personally beginning to prove that I can really be a scientist and a communicator and an educator all at once. I'm not just kind of siloed. And that was just so exciting. You have to deal with these problems that pop up, like what happens if a kid has their vest on and they're just not getting air into it. You've got to solve that problem, and then someone else is swimming off in the opposite direction. But once you can kind of get them all cohesive and swimming together, and they're taking in these sights below, I mean, it's really something else. So coming back from that trip too is just magical. There was this dolphin pod that was following the wake of the boat, and just seeing everyone, these kids look out at that, it really brought me back to my own memories of camp growing up. And I never went to one like this, like Ocean Explorers. I went to camps where I was out on a Kentucky farm, or rafting in West Virginia, or something really cool like that, but a little bit different. But regardless, it instilled this love of the natural world in me that I don't think I would have gotten anywhere else. And it was really, I cherish being able to make that possible for kind of the next generation. So conclusion here, I think the kids are all right. And this experience got me thinking about my future outreach plans. So I personally I don't want community to not be at the center of what I do as a scientist. That's really important to me, that it is centered. And the last leg of my internship was getting my dive master certification. So this was in partnership with Key Dives in Isla Morada, and this is an awesome dive shop, a little bit smaller, and they really hold their dive master interns accountable, which was, I really appreciated that. And I will say though, that at this point in the internship, imposter syndrome was really kind of setting in for me. I had this anxiety about the swimming test, which connected with my anxiety I brought up at the beginning of the presentation. And I knew I could do it. It's just, I had to really kind of break that mental barrier. And by the end of it, everything worked out. I dived 21 times through July and August, and was really thrust into this high stakes leadership role that I'd never been in before. Tasked with, charged with taking care of the safety of people who may have been on a ton of dives before in Key Largo, or maybe dives in other places, or maybe they've never been in the water at all. And you really get this full spectrum of experience that you're charged with taking care of. So on top of that, I also learned my way around a boat for the first time, something I'd never really had to do or had that responsibility. And by the end of it, I passed all my tests, I did fine, and really learned this importance of perseverance. That summer of training really paid off. And I got to show things like this to newcomers and start to really prove my abilities and my expertise, provide knowledge that in real ways affects conservation outcomes. Because the way I see it, if someone doesn't get to view things like this and really appreciate it, they're never going to want to take care of it in as important of a way. So being able to do that was it was incredible. And I want to say I'm still at this point, I was still pretty new to underwater photography, but I was proud of the progress. Obviously, there could be some color correction going on here. But to circle around a little bit, so where I saw those manatees early on in the internship is where I finished up one of the last legs of my dive master. So this is where I, with a staff member from Key Dives, brought in an open water student to finish their certification of open water in this really low vis marina where it's hard to see and navigate. And I was a little worried about it, but it went totally fine. And that was one of the last things I needed to do to get that dive master. And just returning to this place where I saw those manatees felt really, special to me. So to wrap up, from May through August, I was able to complete 43 dives, 12 part of the volunteer fish survey project, and 1 lionfish derby where I helped log over 400 fish, 2 summer camps with just over 20 kids, got my dive master certification, and by the end was one very happy intern. And to touch on what I've been doing since Reef, I worked as a waterfront assistant for a gap year at the School for Field Studies in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And this was my first job in the field. And that experience that I gained from Reef was incredibly invaluable to making me prepared for something like this. Because I was working as a dive master leading undergraduates into the ocean, oftentimes for the very first time. And that was extremely rewarding work and really, I think, symbolized a lot of things coming together in terms of my professional skill set and interests. And by the end of that, these 2 semesters in the fall and spring, I mentored over 50 students through their marine biology fieldwork. And 2 of them went on to be Reef interns, one of them through Our World Underwater Scholarship Society, Mary Quinn, which is so exciting to me. When she got the offer, I was overjoyed. And this job represented a chance for me to put a strong focus on outreach with the local community in South Caicos, something that I really don't know if I would have been ready for without the Reef internship beforehand. This was also a chance this gap year for me to sharpen my photography skills a little bit. And that's something that's long been important to me. So by the end of my time with the School for Field Studies, I quickly ramped up to near 200 total dives and was really starting to get pretty serious about my craft. And in this shot here, you can see Melissa Harris, a fellow waterfront assistant who I met at Coral Restoration Foundation. So I mentioned earlier, I met one of my best friends during that summer with Reef, and here I am in the water with her, with a shark at 90 feet. It was pretty cool. And during that time, I was also becoming increasingly interested in breath hold diving to get shots like this, and coming into my own a bit with publications, not just research, but also broadly accessible scientific writing. So I was able to publish a few of my photos and stories in the National Turks and Caicos Islands magazine. And since then, I'm so excited to say that I got the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. So this has been a chance for me to take a master's that I started at Louisiana State University last fall and turn that into a PhD. So this is really my dream research on coral disease epidemiology, something I've been thinking about for a while. And what I'm doing will have implications for mitigation and restoration efforts on reefs that are similar to the things I was seeing in Key Largo in 2019. So Reef really sent me on this rocket-propelled journey toward that path, and made me a much better competitive applicant for something like this fellowship. And at LSU, I'm not just researching, I'm really excited to also be leading some education and outreach initiatives, which I definitely never would have had the courage to do before being a reef intern and being exposed to that kind of experience already. And I'm so excited that I'm able to have these real and local impacts in Southern Louisiana. So this was a shot following Hurricane Laura that came through last fall. We were able to really get some work done, some restoration at a church following some really heavy destruction. And on top of that, I've been able to help lead the first climate crisis activism group on LSU campus, which I think is just so important with Louisiana being this real epicenter of climate adaptation efforts. And I want to just go back a bit to 4 years ago when I was just getting open water certified in a Kentucky quarry with one of my best friends. And we came out of the water and my dad got this really blurry camera shot of us, but I love it. And skip 4 years ahead, now I'm preparing to get my tech certification in the US Virgin Islands for my first field season as a grad student. So Our World Underwater was this piece in the middle that really propelled me toward these greater heights in diving and so many other things that are part of being a marine scientist and communicator. So now I really think I can make this marine biology thing work finally, and hopefully help others to get there too. And I want to say I could not have done any of this without the gracious support of everybody at Our World Underwater Scholarship Society, and especially Ellie Splain-Roberts, who was my internship coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Congratulations on your fellowship and the pursuit of your PhD. Congratulations to all the 2019 interns. It's been inspiring to hear about your amazing experiences and what you've been up to since. We look forward to watching your careers continue to grow in the coming years. Of course, our internships would not happen if it were not for the hosting individuals and organizations. On behalf of the Society, I would like to extend our appreciation to those who hosted the 2019 interns. Brenda Konar at University of Alaska Fairbanks, Diana Steller at Moss Landing Marine Lab, Heather Albright, Chris Rigaud, and the entire AAUS team, Patty Seary and Divers Alert Network, Dave Conlon and Brett Seymour at the National Park Service Submerged Resources Unit, and the entire team at the Reef Environmental Education Foundation. Your support has made these internships possible. A final note of appreciation to Michael Langhans, our returning NPS intern, for his help in editing today's video. I'm glad you were able to be with us for our Intern Symposium. If you missed yesterday's Scholar Symposium, it can be found on the Society's YouTube channel. Please join us tomorrow for the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society 2021 Awards Ceremony. We'll hold the world premieres of the year-end films for our 3 returning Rolex Scholars. Divers Alert Network will announce the Dan Rolex Diver of the Year. I'll introduce the incoming class of Society Interns, and then we will have the awards presentations for the 2021 Rolex Scholars. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.